Hello, class. I hope you all are doing well today. This is your Quiz 3 review covering chapters 5, 16, and 17. The hypothalamus, cerebral hemispheres, and corpus callosum are all involved in the sexual differentiation in the brain. And here's how that plays out. In the female, the hypothalamus's gonadotropin releasing hormone is estrogen sensitive, influencing the cyclic release of the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone. The two hypothalamic areas are smaller, the right hemisphere of the cerebral cortex is thinner, and the corpus callosum, a network of fibers responsible for communication between hemispheres, is thicker in a female. As far as males, the estrogen-sensitive hypothalamus directs the steady production of testosterone. The two hypothalamic areas are larger in the male brain. The right hemisphere of the cerebral cortex is thicker, and the corpus callosum is thinner in the male brain. Remember those characteristics. Now let's move to embryonic development or sexual development. So we're just going to talk about the first trimester, and I can't stress enough the importance of a woman taking care of her body, eating right, drinking enough water, doing what she can to avoid stress, exercising, and absolutely having a relationship with your doctor the moment you suspect that you could be pregnant. So we're going to talk about weeks, starting with week 4. In weeks 4 through 6, all embryos start with the bipotential gonads and two duct systems, meaning that a fetus, an embryo, um, has the potential to become either a male or a female, um, because the two duct systems that are present allow for that. The Wolffian ducts bring about a male potential, and Mullerian ducts bring about female potential. On week 7 onward, gonadal differentiation occurs. In the presence of the SRY gene on the Y chromosome, testes develop. In the absence of the SRY gene, ovaries develop. In weeks 8 through 12, hormonal influences occurs. Testosterone triggers the Wolffian ducts to develop into the vas deferens and the seminal vesicles. In the absence of testosterone, Mullerian ducts develop into the uterus, fallopian tubes, and the upper vagina. Now, in weeks 9 through 12, the external genitalia begin to take shape. Dihydrotestosterone masculinizes the external structures in a male. As well, the genital tubercle becomes the penis, and the urogenital folds become the scrotum. In the absence of dihydrotestosterone, the genital tubercle becomes the clitoris, and the urogenital folds become the labia, or two sets of labia. So again, unless the SRY gene, testosterone, and anti-Mullerian hormone are present, the embryo will develop into a female. Our biological maleness and femaleness describes sex. The gonadal sex of a female, again, are the ovaries, and the gonadal sex of a male are the testes. The ovaries produce estrogens, and the testes produce androgens. Psychosocial and sociocultural characteristics associated with our sex describes gender. Psychological gender perception, we're talking about gender identity. So it's how a person feels about themselves determines how they identify. Now let's turn our attention to Turner syndrome. Turner syndrome is characterized as XO, meaning that there are one missing chromosome. And this condition is referred to as monosomy. A common variant of someone with Turner syndrome is 45 karyotype rather than the typical 46. Okay. Physically, the person would be have a short stature, they a webbed neck, minimal breast development, lack of pubic hair. They experience ovarian dysgenesis with amenorrhea and infertility. Okay. Sex chromosomes are XX for a female and XY for a male. The female only carries the X chromosome, therefore, the male who holds both X and Y chromosomes determine the sex of the offspring. Remember, there are 23 pairs of human chromosomes, 22 autosome pairs, and only one sex chromosome pair, making up 46. These babies are usually identified as female, characterized as XX at birth. The prenatal female may be exposed to excessive androgens that are produced by her adrenal glands, which masculinizes the external genitals. We're talking about a fetally androgenized female. This condition is also called androgen insensitivity syndrome, or AIS. At birth, the genitals appear to be male, and it can be corrected by minor surgery for the genitalia to appear more female. However, it is important to know how the person identifies rather than making the choice for them. Some will reject a female gender identity, with some assuming a male gender identity and behavior. So it really just depends on how that person identifies. How are the following paraphilias characterized? Frauderism, necrophilia, voyeurism, and exhibitionism. They're characterized as coercive. Um, these paraphilias are diagnosable as paraphilic disorders when they involve non-consenting persons, cause distress or impairment to the individual, and pose a risk of harm to others. Some common types of coercive paraphilias are pedophilic, exhibitionistic, voyeuristic, frauderistic, and sexual sadism. Sexual arousal, primarily from inanimate objects or a particular body part, describes fetish or fetishism. Inanimate objects might be things like high heels, lingerie, gloves, or balloons. Body parts might be a foot, buttocks, hands, armpits, or navel. And other fetishes may involve latex or leather, hair, or material like silk, fur, or rubber. What type of paraphilia can be enjoyed alone or may involve another consenting adult? That would be non-coercive. Non-coercive paraphilias are unusual, but they are consensual, and they do not cause or violate legal boundaries. They may be atypical, but they're not inherently pathological. So some common types of non-coercive paraphilias, again, are fetishism, transvestic fetishism, sexual masochism, sexual sadism, bondage and discipline, and role-playing fantasies. So, sexual arousal from wearing clothes of the opposite sex describes transvestic disorder. For a male to be diagnosed with transvestic disorder, he must have experienced recurrent, intense, sexually arousing fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors involving cross-dressing for at least 6 months. These behaviors cause clinically significant distress or impairment in one or more areas of either social, occupational, or other essential functioning. Okay, we're moving on to exhibitionism, which is exposing one's genitals to an unwilling observer. Similar to transvestic disorder, the individual must have experienced recurrent, intensely arousing fantasies, urges, or behaviors involving exposing their genitals to a non-consenting person for at least 6 months. Diagnosis requires either acting on these urges or experiencing significant distress or impairment because of them. These individuals usually expose themselves to women and children on public transportation, in park, or in crowded areas. And the sexual gratification comes from the shock and surprise of their targets, as what's seen in the picture. Okay. Sexual arousal from receiving physical or psychological pain, such as being spanked, flogged, or otherwise humiliated. We're talking about masochism. Masochism is typically a non-coercive behavior. However, when the behavior causes significant distress or impairs functioning, it becomes a diagnosable disorder. So some of the acts of masochism involve bondage, humiliation play, impact play, like spanking or flogging, asphyxophilia, and self-inflicted acts such as binding, piercing, or shocking oneself. This paraphilia is commonly referred to as golden showers, and I'm sure you can guess what this one is. It is urophilia. Urophilia is also referred to as urolagnia or yeah, urolagnia is good. It's a paraphilia in which sexual excitement is associated with urine or urination. Etymologic, etymologically, the term comes from the Greek uron, meaning urine, and langnia, meaning lust. Sexual arousal from observing others undressing or engaging in sexual activity without consent describes voyeurism. So this is peeping, spying, or recording someone without their consent. It's considered coercive, and the sexual gratification comes from watching, not interacting. Okay. And it is coercive because it's done without the person's consent. Okay. Sexual intercourse that takes place without consent, whether due to actual or threatened force. We are talking about the definition of rape that is in your text. However, for your quiz, I would like for you to know the following definition of rape. Penetration of the vagina or anus with any body part or object or oral penetration by a sex organ of another person without the consent of the victim. And the different types are statutory, when the person is under the age of consent, stranger when you don't know who the person is, acquaintance, you know them, um, or a date, which it could be an acquaintance or a stranger in a date rape situation. Um, yeah. Okay, moving on. Which California law states that sex cannot be considered consensual unless participants have given affirmative, conscious, and voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity? This would be the California Penal Code 261.5. Um, it was written to address the unlawful intercourse with a minor, um, or someone under the age of consent. Depending on the age of the minor, the consequences may range from a misdemeanor to a felony. Other conditions in which the law applies include if the participant is asleep, unconscious, or incapacitated due to alcohol, drugs, or medication. These offenses tend to have narcissistic personality traits. Those are rapists. So some of the characteristics are a proclivity towards violence. They embrace dominance, may have anger towards women or men. Alcohol may contribute to self-centered or less sensitive attitudes, um, which leads them to the behavior. Unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature in the workplace or academic setting, that would be sexual harassment. Under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, sexual harassment includes three types: verbal, physical, or third-party harassment. Um, there's also, um, well, let me describe a bit of this to you. So there's quid pro quo that describes a situation in which it's this for that, or favoritism for sexual behaviors. There is hostile or offensive environments where there's repeated pervasive behavior that interferes with someone's work or learning. And with third-party harassment, it's carried out by others who are not employed by the organization. So it might be clients or customers, online trolls, or um, people like that. Okay. Allies and partners can be most helpful to a rape survivor by blank to them. That would be listening. Sexual contact with a blood relative describes incest. Sexual relations or marriage between close relatives is another way to look at it. Brother, sister, and first cousin incest are the most common. However, father-daughter incest is reported more often, which can um, which can have a greater negative impact than the the former. These relationships arise biologically and raise biological and genetic concerns that are illegal throughout the United States, regardless of whether the relationship involves blood relatives, step relatives, or foster relationships. Internationally, some aspects of these relationships are allowed. Sexual contact with a non-relative, that describes pedophilia. Pedophilia is also referred to as molestation. It is a coercive behavior like transvestic disorder and exhibitionism. These individuals experience recurrent, intense sexual fantasies, urges, or behaviors involving prepubescent children for at least 6 months. The individual is typically you. The individual or the victim is the individuals carrying out this behavior are at least 16 years old and at least 5 years older than the child. Okay, we're almost done. Memories of trauma are repressed initially, then remembered by victims later. We're talking about recovered memories. These memories are usually brought to the surface through therapy. And oftentimes there's unconventional techniques that are used, like hypnosis and guided visualization. Um, it may also be done through journaling, dream analysis, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Critics argue legally that memories can be planted in suggestible clients by therapists, but when memories come back spontaneously, those are those are considered legitimate because the person's brain is ready to release that memory as opposed to it being brought out in therapy. Um, but recovered memories, depending on how they are accessed, can be reliable, is all I want to say about that. Okay, moving on. These individuals can legally own or sell computer-generated images of children engaged in sex, provided that no actual children are shown or composited into a sex scene. We are talking about pedophiles in cyberspace. Now, when this text was produced, this information was current, but I would like to add to this that AI-generated deep fake nudes are on the rise, and um, so it complicates the information that's here because it's not actually like this anymore. However, if you do know that someone has been approached or a child has actually gone out to meet someone who has contacted them on the internet, go to report.cybertit.org to report that. That's extremely important. It's operated by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they are a lifeline for concerned parents. Okay. The extra credit question is on the theorists Langdon Parks, Alfred Kinsey, Fritz Klein, and Michael D. Storm. So the information is in your modules to look over their theories, familiarize yourself with that so you can do well on that extra credit question. Thank you all for listening. Um, and I look forward to talking to you all soon, and good luck on your test.